sort of keeping at least one eye on the Bucks. So they have 7 free agents, 4 of which you could say would be their sort of core players. Guys like Brook Lopez, guys like Gary Trent, potentially Bobby Portis at the outside of his contract over the weekend. And look, Giannis has made it clear he wants to compete for championships. The Bucks, as constructed last year, were a team in the middle of the pack, and that was before they lost Dame Lillard to an Achilles injury. Now, Giannis has not asked for a trade. The Bucks are not interested in trading for him. Right now, there is no stress in that. But if the Bucks don't reassemble a team that is viewed as a contender in the Eastern Conference, that may be something that Giannis revisits, and that's one thing the league is definitely watching.
So, Tim, what does that next month look like for the Bucks then, if they're trying to convince Giannis that they're serious about winning again?
Well, it's going to be a real grab bag search to try to find enough guys to do what Brian said, which is make this team competitive enough in the Eastern Conference to make it seem like they could be a home court advantage team. And even with Jason Tatum's Achilles tear, even with Tyrese Halliburton's Achilles tear, it's hard to see for me how the Bucks are going to be good enough to do that. They have even less draft assets than the Lakers. They have very limited financial flexibility. It's unclear if they're even able to go into the luxury tax, and they've got over $130 million tied up in 3 players. Giannis Antetokounmpo, Dame Lillard, who's probably out for next season, and Kyle Kuzma. That is not a lot of wiggle room to work with if, again, the goal is to really be a threat in the East. And by the way, these guys lost in 5 games in the first round of the Pacers and were pretty far away from being competitive in that series with Giannis playing out of his mind. So there's a ton of work for the Bucks to do. And again, very limited financial and draft assets to do so. This is going to be as hard a challenge as we've seen in the NBA for a while. Turn the Bucks into a championship team with the assets these guys have at their disposal.
The question that follows, Tim, is if they don't, then are we looking at a situation where Giannis will want out?
Well, it's impossible to know exactly what Giannis Antetokounmpo is going to say, but my stance on this the whole offseason has been, let's see where the Bucks sit on August 1st. Let's see how they do in July. Let's see what they can get, and then let's revisit things in a few weeks and see where all of this stands. Because the Bucks in the past have not had a lot of assets and have found ways to be aggressive and go out and fill in the roster. Gary Trent last summer was a good example. He was a guy that was expected to be, somewhere in the mid-teens as a free agent. They got him on the minimum, and they're going to have a lot of playing time to offer. They're going to have being able to play next to Giannis Antetokounmpo and get a lot of attention taken off you to be able to produce as something to offer. They have some things they can offer to players to come there and play, but at the end of the day, they have to find a way to get it done, and let's see where this sits on August 1st.
The one thing that John Horst, their general manager, has been able to do, every time there has been some speculation regarding Giannis through Holiday, they go out and acquire him. Damian Lillard, they go out and acquire him. Giannis signs 2 extensions here. The problem right now is there's not another move for that magnitude of player because of what they don't have. They have a 2031 or 2032 pick to trade, similar to the Lakers. They have the Kuzma contract, but as Tim said, 80% of their salary is tied up in there, and they have all these free agents, so they're going to have to prioritize onto who they want to bring back.
Yeah, and I'm an actions over words guy. Over the draft, the Milwaukee Bucks 2026 first-round pick was used by the New Orleans Pelicans as a big trade piece to acquire Derek Queen, who moved up 10 in the draft. And in fact, when they did that, the rest of the league was like, oh my God, I can't believe that they paid so much. The reason the 2026 Bucks draft pick is viewed as so valuable by the league is that the league does not believe the Bucks are going to pull this off.
Right.
Now, they could be wrong, but that's what people are watching.
If they don't pull it up, you're looking at a situation where one of the storylines later this summer could be, where's Giannis going to go? What would be a team you'd watch?
Well, listen, there's a reason why San Antonio still has a lot of their draft assets and players, and they were not heavily involved in the Kevin Durant trade.
There's a reason why the Knicks were on Kevin Durant's preferred list and said, thanks but no thanks.
So, as Wendy opened up this segment by saying, the entire league is paying attention to what's going on in Milwaukee, and so will we over the coming weeks. Let's finish with another team that's surrounded by uncertainty. Windhorst, the Knicks, don't have a coach. What's going on here?
Yeah, so their next candidate up for an interview is James Borrego. He's currently lead assistant with the New Orleans Pelicans, former head coach of the Charlotte Hornets, a well-regarded, longtime top coach in the league. Comes out of the Greg Popovich tree. Was interviewed and a finalist for the Cleveland Cavaliers job last summer. And look, they interviewed Mike Brown. They interviewed Mike Inouye, assistant with the Timberwolves. They interviewed Taylor Jenkins. They're going through a process, and we're through the draft. This is unusual to still not have a coach as free agency begins, but I would say it was unusual to fire a coach that just led the team to a conference final.
Yeah, so just kind of going against the grain here are the Knicks. What do you make of the way they're handling it?
Well, they've got 7 of their best players under contract, and free agency starts on Sunday. That aren't on Monday, excuse me. The concern with me is they don't have a coach in place, and their priority is their depth. And when you're going to meet with free agents, the players basically have to go bargain shopping. What are you selling them on? Who's the coach going to be? We went through this in 2014 when I was with the Nets. We had traded Jason Kidd, who was the head coach at the time, to Milwaukee, and then we had no head coach going into free agency. A little bit different. We wound up hiring Lionel Hollins, and that did hamper us a little bit as far as how we could approach players that we were willing to sign.
Just not having one in place at the time of the signing.
Yeah, there's a big difference as a team that's got $60 million in cap space and is going to meet with marquee free agents, and you don't have a coach compared to what New York has, where you do have the 7 players. But I do think there is a priority to get a coach in place pretty soon here.
Tim, how do you see this playing out in New York?
I mean, look, Graz, here's the bottom line for the Knicks. When you fire Tom Thibodeau after making the conference finals for the first time in a quarter century, there's only one thing that's acceptable, which is making the NBA Finals and competing for a championship next season. If the Knicks hire a coach over the next month, 2 months, 3 months, whenever, and that coach gets them to the NBA Finals, everyone's going to forget about their process. If they hire a coach and they lose in the first or second round, they don't go as far as they did last year with Tibbs, it's going to be, why did the Knicks fire Tibbs? What are these guys doing? What's going to happen next? So the process has been messy so far, but as Brian said earlier, actions over words. If the action winds up being getting the Knicks where they want to go, this will all be forgotten. The goal now for the Knicks has to be to find a way to get a coach that's going to check those boxes for them, and there isn't an obvious one out there to get. That's why, despite being an attractive job with a very talented roster, with an incredibly deep-pocketed owner, this job is still open a month after Tom Thibodeau was let go.
Tons still going on in the NBA as the summer gets underway, and we will continue talking about it. In order to get from where they ended the season to title contention, Bobby, what do they need to do?
Well, as Brian said, they need to get a center here, and this is what they have. They have $60 million in expiring contracts. They have the $5.7 million tax mid-level extension. Here's the list of centers that are potentially out there. Certainly Jackson Hayes, who was on the roster last year, Luke Cornett, Mason Plumlee, some of these older veterans, Larry Nance, Clint Capella, Al Horford, of course. Not the most robust center market out there, as you can see here, but they have that tax mid-level exception. They have a 2031 or 2032 first to go out. Remember, they tried to go out and get Mark Williams at the deadline. That failed. Mark Williams goes to Phoenix here. So there are resources to go out there for the Lakers here, but they're certainly competing against a lot of other teams. And as Brian said, there's a priority with Luka extension eligible August 2nd to put the right pieces around him and LeBron.
August 2nd, a little more than a month away. Tim Bontemps, what should the Lakers' focus be here over the next month?
Well, Dan, as Bobby said, they have to get a center, right? They have to find somebody who's a lob threat, in particular for Luka Doncic. That's the kind of player he's always thrived with. But this team needs several things. They need more shooting on the perimeter. They need more defense on the perimeter to be able to stop some of the elite perimeter scorers in the Western Conference. And they have to find that rim protector on defense who could also be a lob threat. That's a lot of stuff for a team that, as Bobby said, only has that taxpayers mid-level exception, which isn't that big, to go out and sign guys for free agency outside of minimums, and then a couple of draft assets in trade.